Hello and welcome back to the AOR Xbox 360 F1 League for another Season 8 race recap. It's only 3 races to go in the season, and for this one we are at the Yas Marina circuit for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, where the sun will set in our faces and it will be absolutely beautiful. And hopefully a lot of action on the track as well. So let's now take a look at how they line up on the grid for this race, and once again we've got Tyrrell Rosberg on pole position, his 10th pole position of the season. That is more than half of the races and extremely impressive from Rosberg, who has well and truly turned into the qualifying king of this season. And over 5/10 of a second behind him in second place we got Tyrrell Martin in the Toro Rosso. On the second row there is the championship leader XMG in the Red Bull, and also KPTK in 92 in the Williams. Then very close times between the guys in the midfield, with Leobot in 6th place just ahead of Living Dead, and his teammate Ricky C just behind him. Tyrrell Macy and Citizen then follow ahead of the Contrubuted and Fisi Fan 91, the latter two being the only ones to start on the prime tires for this race. And then down at the back, the second Caterham of Trace Me 92, and also Tyrrell Limitless actually, who will be starting the race at the back after having a qualifying ban penalty carried over from the previous race. So that was the grid for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Let's now dive straight into the action in the race. 14 cars on the grid for this 28 lap race around Abu Dhabi, with one of the favourites, Tyrrell Limitless, starting right at the back of the field, and Fisi and Contrubuted near the back as well on the prime tyres. And Tyrrell Martin had a great qualifying in his Toro Rosso, starting from P2 on the grid, and he got a great launch at the start, moving alongside pole sitter Tyrrell Rosberg almost immediately, and grabbing the inside line for turn 1 to take the lead of the race after one corner. Further down in the midfield there was a lot of bunching up, with the Ricky C and Leobot getting stopped in the track slightly, and Ricky C almost getting passed by the Ferrari of Tyrrell Mazy as well, going side by side for several corners, but the Ricky C getting back ahead eventually. And down into the first chicane of Sector 2, XMG was having a look at second place Tyrrell Rosberg as well, and again a lot of action in the midfield, with Living Dead getting sideways and almost getting hit by his teammate, who managed to avoid him with a bit of a slide. Ricky C doing very well to keep control of the car there, and he even paused Living Dead on the exit of the hairpin after getting a great run in the traction zone. Further down the straight now, on board with 4th place KPTK, and XMG was once again having a look at Tyrrell Rosberg, putting his Red Bull firmly in the mirrors of the Marussia, coming through turns 8 and 9. KPTK also getting put under pressure from Brocek slightly, and XMG actually got a great exit out of that chicane, pulling alongside Rosberg on the run down towards turn 11. Rosberg trying to defend the inside line, but Maddie's straight line speed getting him ahead even before the braking zone, and up into second place for him. Now let's look at the replay of how the start looked from the back of the field, where both of the prime starters got a really slow launch off the line. Fisi actually getting passed by both Trace and Limitless into turn 1. Limitless sending that cone on the inside flying for good measure. Here we got the start from Limitless' perspective. He just dived up the inside of 2 cars into the first corner, already starting his charge through the field. And down into the first chicane, he picked his spot nicely, getting through the room on the outside to pass Contrubuted and nail his Citizen as well. And then out of the hairpin, he managed to outdrag Mazy on the exit, and then get past Citizen when he ran wide through the chicane, allowing Limitless to get alongside through the second apex and pull ahead on the exit. And Fisi also gained a couple of positions back when he went around the outside of both of the Caterhams at the hairpin as well, to get back up to the position where he started the race. And then later in the lap, Tyrrell Mazy had to go wide to avoid Citizen going into the triple chicane, and Fisi managed to get past him as well. So a lot of action on the first lap, and it was not over yet, as on the exit of turn 14, Ricky C got a great run on Leobot, which put them side by side through the double apex going into the hotel section. Ricky C doing really well to leave Leobot enough space on the inside, and still getting the move done. A very impressive pass from the Mercedes, with his teammate Living Dead watching him from behind. But Living Dead then made a mistake coming into the penultimate corner when his tire got stuck on the curb, and Limitless then came around to gain another position for him. Limitless already up to 8th place after one extremely action-packed first lap, which took me almost 3 minutes to get through. So, lap 2, and Tyrrell Martin still in the lead of the race, coming into turn 5, but coming through the corner he seemed to be too aggressive on the throttle and lost the back end completely, almost spinning out, regaining control in the runoff area, but XMG and Tyrrell Rosberg both moved ahead of him, and he was put under pressure from KPTK as well, but managed to recover for a decent exit out of the hairpin. But KPTK stayed in his slipstream on the run down towards turn 8 and grabbed the inside line going into the corner, Martin braking later, but then ran wide and off the track, and Martin ended up cutting the corner and then having to slow down, letting KPTK through, and also putting himself under pressure from Brocek, who with a lot of curse easily moved himself past Tyrrell Martin as well on the run down to turn 11. And if that wasn't enough, coming out of turn 14, Martin had another half spin off the curb to top off what had been an absolutely awful second lap for him, dropping from the lead of the race down to 6th. And on the next lap up at the front, there was a move going on for the lead of the race, with Tyrrell Rosberg moving himself seemingly quite easily with DRS past X-Matty on the run down towards the chicane, with KPTK also holding off Brošek for 3rd. And a bit further behind in the battle for 10th, the other Williams of Fisi was moving past Citizen with another straightforward DRS pass, although Citizen tried to perform a switchback on the chicane to get a better exit onto the second DRS straight, and Citizen, also on the better, albeit more worn tyres, did challenge Fisi back coming towards turn 11, but Fisi held the inside line, was slightly later on the brakes, and despite Citizen's good attempt, managed to hold on to the final points position for now. And at the end of lap 3, the first round of pit stops were already starting, as Tyrrell Rosberg was the only one out of the top 6 to go in on that lap. This put X-Matty back into the lead, but he seemed to be struggling a bit on the worn option tyres and was put under severe pressure from KPTK on the second DRS straight of lap 4, KPTK using both KERS and DRS to pull off a pretty easy move on the Red Bull to take over what was, at least for now, the lead of this Grand Prix. The Williams driver looking on course for another impressive performance after also challenging for the lead last time out in India. And at the end of lap 4, the top 3 all went into the pit lane, meaning Ricky C could take the lead for at least a lap. And a bit of a weird moment in the pit lane, as it almost looked like Brošek was trying to pass X-Matty into the pit box, but it all turned out fine, and it was down to the pit crews to get the cars out as fast as possible. The Williams boys keeping KPTK ahead of X-Matty and Brošek also staying behind them both. Tyrrell Rosberg, though, who pitted on the lap before, had gained a huge amount of time by doing the undercut, as when KPTK came out of the pit lane, Rosberg was well ahead. You can see him there over at the chicane already, almost 3 seconds the gap between them at this point. So going into the pits early had seemed to benefit Rosberg, but it had seemed to backfire massively on Ricky C to stay out, as coming towards the end of lap 5 his tyres were absolutely shot, and Limitless had already caught up to the back of him. And going into the pits, Ricky C's struggles just came to a dead stop as he spun while turning into the pits and got reset, losing several seconds. And at the same time, something weird happened with Limitless. Look at that. Limitless car getting flung up into the air by a ghosted Ricky C, almost throwing the Red Bull over the barrier and back onto the track. So another weird pit lane moment in this race, but eventually they both got into their pit box without any further struggles. But Limitless ended up facing another silver arrow on the exit of the pit lane as he came out side by side with the Living Dead. But luckily for Limitless, the left side pit exit put him on the inside line going into the next corner, allowing him to stay ahead in what was currently 9th place on the track. Fisi's choice to start the race on the prime tyres had allowed him to chill out in the lead of the race for a couple of laps, until he went in for another set of fresh primes at the end of lap 7, rejoining the track all the way down in 11th place with quite a gap to the main group ahead, but at least he had the option tyres to look forward to later on in the race. So it was looking better for the other Williams of KPTK, sitting in P2 at the moment, but coming into turn 8 on lap 8 he had a huge lock-up which sent him wide onto the marbles, and X-Matty seemed to understeer into his side pod and somehow spin back off the track. Here's a replay from Brošek's view, the contact not really anyone's fault, but the weird game physics just deciding to throw X-Matty's car off the track after the tiniest of touches on KPTK's side pod, Matty dropping all the way from 3rd down to 7th, and at the end of the next straight his teammate Limitless pulled off an almighty dive bomb on Tyrrell Martin, Max Verstappen style, and pulling it off cleanly, and Limitless was now sitting in 5th place ahead of his teammate after starting the race from last. And it was going to get even better for Limitless, as on the next lap it was the other Toro Rosso of Leobot who became the victim of another good overtake, not quite as big of a dive bomb this time, but effective nonetheless to move himself past the Swede and up to 4th. And at the end of the next straight, Tyrrell Martin had an issue under braking, seemingly missing his braking point a bit and turning right to avoid hitting his teammate, and this dropped him down behind X-Matty and down to 7th. And on the next lap there was again more action on the chicane between the DRS straight, when X-Matty and Leobot went side by side, X-Matty pulling ahead into 5th place on the exit, and Tyrrell Martin as well trying to follow him through in the slipstream, and with DRS as well possibly eyeing up a move to get back ahead of X-Matty, but he ended up on the curb on the outside line, and braking hard on the curb is not a good idea in these cars. Martin suffering a huge lockup which put him back down to 7th behind his teammate again. And just while that was going on, the battle for 2nd place was also heating up, with Brošek trying to move round the outside of KPTK into the triple chicane, but just like Martin ended up missing his braking point slightly and having to take to the runoff area, and Limitless saw the opportunity to pounce following KPTK through past Brošek with a bit of argy-bargy and demoting the pole to 4th place. and Limitless, now having gone from the back up to a podium position, was keen for more as he looked to set up KPTK for an overtake on lap 11 on the second DRS straight. He got a great run, and KPTK once again defending the inside line. Limitless looking to the outside, but turning in a little bit too early and hitting the rear of KPTK's car, completely spinning both cars around. Limitless also receiving a 10-second penalty, and KPTK excruciatingly having to watch the whole field pass through before he could rejoin the track. Probably losing about 15 seconds, which with how close the field is in this race was as much as 11 positions, or 10 when Limitless gave him the position back a few corners later, which was good to see from him, but surely taking none of the disappointment away from either of these drivers. The battle for second place had to go on though, even if that was now between Brošek and X-Matty, and once again the action was coming on the second DRS straight when X-Matty went on the attack on the Marussia. Brošek not doing as good a job at defending the inside line as KPTK had done, and X-Matty took advantage to slip up the inside, forcing Brošek to back out to take what was actually at that moment in time the lead of the race. But the top three of the race, X-Matty, Brošek and Tyrrell Martin, all went into the pits at the end of that lap, knowing that Tyrrell Rosberg had already pitted on the lap before. And as Brošek left his pit box, Rosberg was already way past it, having obviously extended his lead of the race massively, while these guys had all been having their incidents and battling. And speaking of Rosberg, here he is actually right now passing Fisi for what was currently second place of the race. Ricky C, the man up ahead, obviously also pitting soon, and Rosberg was looking well on course for a dominant victory in this Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Moving past the halfway distance in the race, and KPTK and Limitless were both trying to stage a comeback after their incident. KPTK easily moving past Tyrrell Maisie with DRS before Limitless started hunting him down as well, and Maisie then made a mistake going into the hotel section, which gifted Limitless the opportunity, and Maisie could not recover his car fast enough to fight back. In the battle for the podium places, Leobot had seemed to jump up to third ahead of both Brošek and Martin throughout the pit stops, and on lap 16 Martin made it a Torosso 3-4 when he DRS'd past Brošek. But then on lap 18 Brošek challenged him back and went round the outside of turn 11 to reclaim 4th place in a very impressive fashion, with Ricky C looking on closely behind as well. And back to two drivers who should have been in that battle themselves. KPTK now got passed by Limitless for 9th place, not daring to defend the inside to that corner as hard this time. So Limitless was now in the lead of this comeback charge, but there was still a long way to go up to the front pack as the sun was starting to set around Abu Dhabi. At the end of lap 18, Tyrrell Martin decided that it was time for a tyre change, as he became the first out of everyone to go in for his third and final stop. The Living Dead also chose to go for the same strategy, which could potentially prove risky as they would now both have to go 10 laps on their final set of primes. Down in the midfield there was another battle brewing as Fisi was getting very close to the back of a Citizen coming out of the turn 7 hairpin, and he was able to get a great run in the traction zone on these slightly fresher tyres, but the Sauber clearly had good straight line speed as even with DRS Fisi took a while to pull ahead coming into the chicane. This forced Fisi to cover off the inside line, and Citizen was able to cut back to get a much better exit out of the corner and onto the second DRS straight, and this time it was Citizen time to use Curse to his advantage and DRS, pulling out of the slipstream of the Williams on the outside line though, but he did manage to get his car sufficiently alongside for Fisi to have to do a very optimistic move if he were to hold onto position, and in the end the Frenchman managed to keep hold of 6th after some very good battling. On the next lap, the race leader Tyrrell Rosberg made his final stop, and Brošek saw him come out of the pit lane ahead of him. Brošek of course not having pitted yet, which essentially meant that Tyrrell Rosberg was a pit stop ahead of him. But Brošek was still sitting in a solid 3rd place in the race, but that was being challenged when Ricky C went side by side with him through the chicane. Ricky C doing extremely well to keep alongside despite being on the outside for the second apex. So when he got DRS as well on the run down to turn 11, his straight line speed was no match for the Marussia, and the Flying Irishman Ricky C was now actually up to 3rd place after a relatively anonymous race. And back down in the midfield, Fisi was looking for another chance at getting past Citizen, taking a really wide entry into the hairpin to cut back and get a much better run, putting fuel up the rich mix using a lot of his curse and getting DRS, and surely this time he would make the move stick, but Citizen didn't give up as on the next straight he once again challenged him back, but this time Fisi was slightly further ahead than last time, and Citizen could not manage to hold it around the outside as his tyres were also clearly starting to go off, sliding through the exit of that corner. So at the end of the lap he went in for a very welcome pit stop, changing onto his final set of prime tyres. So did Brošek and X-Matty as well, while Ricky C actually stayed out for one more lap. But Tyrrell Martin's decision to pit 2 laps earlier seemed to actually have paid off, at least for now, as he had jumped ahead of Brochek and saw X-G come out of the pit side by side with him, and the other early pitter, Living Dead, actually setting the fastest lap of the race as well, and it was becoming clear that being on the fresher tyre through pitting earlier gained a lot of time around this track, but obviously it does come with the risk of being on worse tyres at the end of the stint, although Martin was not really thinking about that right now, as he got a good run out of the hairpin and passed X-G on the first DRS straight. But as we had seen so many times earlier in the race, the second DRS straight then gives the passed car an opportunity to retake the position, and that is exactly what X-G did. So at the end of lap 21, and it was time for Ricky C to finally make his final stop, but upon turning into the pit lane he received a 10-second time penalty from the game for cutting the corner on the entry, very much compromising his potential podium finish, and just to top it off, the guys he was battling with before had gained several seconds on him by pitting earlier. The race was now nearing its end, but the battles were still going strong. Leobot made a mistake on the exit of turn 6, which put him under severe pressure from Brochek, who seemed to have got a great run out of the hairpin and onto the DRS straight, but the Toro Rosso surprisingly showing extremely good acceleration, and for some reason Brochek did not even get DRS from the game, despite having been slightly behind at the detection point. Very weird situation. But luckily for him, the second DRS straight gave him another opportunity to get past, and this time the game decided to work and gave him DRS, at which point it became easy for him and Leobot could no longer keep him behind. At the same time, further back in the field, Citizen received a visit from the other Williams after battling Fisi earlier. This time it was KPTK who was having a look into the chicane, but the Sauber held the inside line nicely into the corner, meaning KPTK would have to hope for better luck on the next straight. But Living Dead driving just ahead of them did not help KPTK's case, as Citizen also got DRS because of that, and he was not able to make any progress in what was now a 4-car train behind Living Dead. And at the end of the lap, Fisi, from second place, became the final person in the race to pit, and thanks to having not run the option tyre earlier in the race, he was now able to fit that for what should be a fast final stint. But despite pitching from second, he looked set to rejoin the track behind this whole train, battling for 7th, but Limitless was keen to make it less of a train as he completely spun into the wall at the exit of turn 1, losing his whole front wing and getting a puncture as well, once and for all, destroying his race at this track, which was becoming an absolute nightmare venue for him. Limitless actually failing to finish higher than 10th place in all of his 3 visits here, quite an extraordinary record for a driver of his caliber. Despite Limitless race being over, there was still loads of action to be had as the battle for 7th had to be settled, and it looked to be going in Citizen's favour when he passed and outbraked Living Dead into turn 8, but he went a little bit too deep, ended up having to cut the corner and getting a really slow exit, which instead of gaining him 7th place dropped him down to 9th as KPDK was able to sneak past as well. And he was about to go back to being a 4-car train when Fisi caught up towards the end of the lap, obviously pushing hard on his fresh option tyres, and coming into the final corner, Citizen braked a little bit too early, caught Fisi off guard, and there was some weird lag contact between them, which ended up in a bit of a non-optimal overtake. And meanwhile, at the back of the field, Limitless was still not getting along with the pit entry. And back at the front, the battle for the podium was heating up when Brochek got a great run with DRS on Tyrrell Martin to move up to 3rd, another straightforward DRS pass as we'd seen countless times already in the race. But it wasn't going to be as straightforward for KPDK when he was challenging Living Dead for a 7th, as they approached the braking zone for turn 8 side by side, with Living Dead determined to hold on to the position, keeping it side by side very close together through the chicane. Great driving between the two of them, with Fisi looking on from behind, potentially eyeing a move on his teammate who had been looking much quicker throughout the whole race weekend, and he placed himself behind Living Dead on the inside line, both of those two with DRS going down the straight, the two Williams going side by side into the corner, and the pressure seemed to be slightly too much for KPDK, who lost the car over the curb and ended up losing a front wing end plate after tapping the wall. Another frustrating moment for the Brit after it had been looking so good for him in the early stages of the race, but now he was riding into the sunset with only 1 championship point to his name. But his teammate was still on a charge, and the Living Dead was really starting to struggle on his tyres, and with Fisi pulling under pressure, Living Dead once again made a mistake into the penultimate corner, which gave Fisi the opportunity to slip by with relative ease and up to 7th place, and Living Dead was not allowed to rest just yet, as once again he got put under pressure from Citizen this time, the Mercedes driver covering the inside line into turn 11, but Citizen doing a really well-timed cutback to get alongside through the triple chicane, which then gave him the inside for the next corner, and despite Living Dead's best efforts to hold on, he ended up braking on the marbles and dropping yet another position in this race. And Living Dead was not the only driver starting to struggle with grip, as Tyrrell Martin's tyres were also severely starting to go off after his pit stop on lap 18, and there was nothing he could do when Ricky C came around on the second DRS straight to make a pass on the penultimate lap of the race, Martin having to concede the position, dropping down to 5th place after having been on course for a podium a few laps before. And it would get even worse for him, as when he went a bit too hard over the curb, the tyres just completely gave up, did not want to be part of that, and he also dropped 5th place to his teammate Leobot, and he wasn't over there. It seemed like every curb on the circuit wanted to throw the Toro Rosso off the track. It both felt like and looked like Martin was driving inside a volcano at this point. But the tyre struggles would soon come to an end as the race finished with Tyrrell Rosberg taking the win by a dominant margin. X-Medi driving home in P2, a few seconds ahead of Brošek, who was hunted out by Ricky C towards the end of the race, and coming into the final corner of the last lap, Brošek lost the back end slightly and actually ran out of fuel on the exit for Ricky C to drive past him just before the finish line. But with Ricky C's penalty, that did not actually make that much of a difference. Fisi also hunted down Tyrrell Martin right towards the end, but the lap came to an end just a bit too soon for him. And quite a bit behind at the back of the field, Tyrrell Limitless finishing off his very struggle-filled race, doing a bit of a rage spin and a reverse across the line. But in the end, as the sun set, it was Tyrrell Rosberg who could celebrate his 4th win of the season, seemingly as the only driver in the race who didn't have either an incident or a lengthy battle going on. So perfect race for him, 16.7 seconds behind 2nd place X-Medi, with Brošek 2.7 seconds further behind that. Ricky C without his penalty would have had 3rd, but he dropped to 5th behind Leobot. And then there was Tyrrell Martin, who was being rapidly caught by Fisi towards the end. They finished 6th and 7th, before Citizen, KPDK and Living Dead rounded off the points finishers. Tyrrell Macy and Tyrrell Limitless both had disappointing races for them, and both of the Caterhams actually failed to finish in the end, but at least a slight consolation for Limitless by setting the fastest lap of the race. And in the Drivers' Championship, with only 2 races to go, 2 interesting position changes, most notably Tyrrell Rosberg moving up to 3rd past Tyrrell Limitless after being 24 points behind before this race, the race win obviously working wonders for him. And KPDK's unfortune also meant he got passed by Brošek in the battle for 7th, with Leobot also moving quite a bit closer. And finally, we got some movement towards the top of the Constructors' Championship. Red Bull obviously still miles clear, but Marussia have finally passed and moved ahead of the Mercedes in the battle of 2nd, after both of the Marussias finished on the podium here, so very good day for them. But that wraps it up for this Season 8 recap of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix from the AOR F1 League. Coming up next is the penultimate race of the season at Circuit of the Americas. I'm not quite sure it'll be possible to match the amount of action we had in this race, but it'll certainly be an exciting one as well. So hopefully you will join us for that one as well. See you then.